Welcome back to the Director's Playbook. I'm your host, Paul Lovelace, and today we're tackling a game changer, community awareness seminars, also known as advanced planning seminars. Did you know that funeral homes can actually boost pre-need sales just by hosting seminar events? Well, my guest today, Pat Zalusky, is someone who has helped countless funeral homes across the country turn education into connection and growth. So Pat, good to see you. We're happy to have you here today. How are you?
Thank you, Paul. It's fun to be here.
Well, I love it. We can talk about college football, we can talk about the Lakers, or we can talk about seminars. I don't know which. I guess we're here to talk about seminars, right?
Well, and after last year, Alabama fans don't have much to talk about, so.
We'll save that for another time, but it's always good to see you. I remember, you and I have been working together a while now. I remember one of the first things you told me, and this has been about 20 years ago or so. You said, it's not always the funeral home you expect to win the relationship, but the one that gets there first.
Amen.
You still believe in that?
There's, you got a couple funeral homes in town. You got one group of people are going to A, one are going to B, and then you got a pretty big group of people who are like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm open. Got to get there first.
Well, hey, we'll get to that here in just a minute. By way of introduction, would you just do us a favor here for those of you who may not know who you are? Pat, would you just give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, my name is Pat Celelesi. I grew up in the Midwest and moved down to the Southeast about 7 years ago. I just kind of stumbled into pre-need. I was an English major and saw an ad in the paper one day from the local funeral home, went in there, had them a chat. And what I tell all the funeral homes and agents that I work with was I was never the best salesman. Almost always took me 2 appointments to close a contract, but I've always been really good at generating lots of leads. So if I could generate lots of leads, I didn't have to be a great salesman because I always had a lot of people to talk to. And that's kind of how Laker got started because I had more leads than I could get to. So we just started.
Good problem to have.
It was a very good problem to have. And so that's kind of the germ of how things started. And that was close to 40 years ago now.
That's very interesting. I'm a firm believer that every funeral home can conduct a seminar, and really every funeral home should conduct a seminar. I mean, in fact, if I owned a funeral home, I'd probably have, 1 or 2 a year. I just believe in them to that degree. So can we just start kind of real broad here about, why you believe seminars are what they are and kind of give us an overview of that?
Well, it's just being able to shake someone's hand, being in the same room, making a nice presentation to them. And a lot of times people, they don't frequent funeral homes. It's not somewhere they hang out. So if we can get somebody in your building, now when they think of a funeral home, that image comes into their mind. So it just, for me, and it's such a non-threatening atmosphere also. They're not wondering if we're going to ask them to take their checkbooks out, anything like that. They can kind of hide, in a group of people. So that's probably the main reasons why I think it's such a great atmosphere.
Don't you think there's a little bit of a group dynamic there too? I mean, you feel,
yes,
being amongst others, that you're not all by yourself and there's some sort of a safety in that.
We hear all the time from people, I didn't think there was going to be this many people here. And what that tells me is they're not alone in their concerns about this topic. And there's that group mentality. The more people are interested in something, the more they feel it's acceptable, it's okay. And then maybe they might even feel like, wow, I should really do this if everyone else is doing this.
I love that. Well, maybe for our audience who does not have an experience or who do not have an experience with seminars of any kind, can you maybe just describe what an average seminar might look like just quickly?
Yeah, we greet people as they come in. We encourage them to show up a little early. This isn't a funeral. We don't have to get them in their seat immediately. The first words out of our mouth are not, hey, sign the guest book. No, it's, hey, how you doing? Boy, that's a neat sweater. Where'd you get that? And, you're just chatting along, having a good time with them. We have everyone do a pre-programmed survey before we start. Kind of ask them what they're most interested in learning about today. We can come back to that tool in a minute and why we do that. We start on time. If this says 10 o'clock, we want to start at 10 o'clock and then we finish on time.
Good. I know all the funeral directors and our listeners will appreciate the punctuality of that for sure.
Yes.
So just to be clear, you conduct these at the funeral home's location, right? One of their chapels or
Most of the time, we're in the funeral home.
okay.
There are instances, and there's certain funeral homes I work with, and I can't tell you why, but we can't get people to come in the funeral home. So we'll go to a restaurant or some other meeting place of that nature. We might do them in a church, but yeah, we'd like to get them in the building if we can.
And you're getting what's the average attendance, you think?
I wrote that down, actually, because I'm a big numbers guy. 32 and a half people per session.
32.
So if we're doing 2 sessions, and that's our average. And if it gets too large, I mean, that's a good problem. But it can lose its effectiveness because with 32 people coming in the door, everybody can have a personal greeting or a conversation, either with myself, the funeral home staff, or somebody. And we like to do that if we can.
Well, is it typical for you to have somebody from the funeral home greet the audience, or how do you normally do that?
Yeah. Usually what we'll do is a couple minutes before the program starts is I'll walk up front, I'll do a little housekeeping, kind of give them here's what to expect, that type of thing. And then a couple minutes later, the funeral home owner, if possible, ideally, comes up, thanks everyone for coming, maybe introduces his staff, anybody who helped out, it's a chance to give them a pat on the back. And from there, we can go a couple different directions. Sometimes I will handle the whole seminar presentation, wire to wire. Other times we might have a guest speaker or two at the presentation. It all depends on really what the funeral home wants.
I'm just thinking, if you can get 32 and a half people, and that's just per event, right? There could be more than one event.
Right. So if we're doing 2, that would be 60 some people for the day.
So that seems awesome. So why wouldn't more funeral homes participate in the seminar event process?
I think there's a couple main reasons. Probably the first one is just life gets in the way.
Yeah.
We're all busy. We all have 4 or 5 projects we would love to implement or put into play at our business, but when are you going to find the time to do that? There's fear involved. Wonder if I send out an invitation and it offends somebody, or wonder if they feel like I'm trying to sell them. We don't want to sell. And then I think a big one for some people is they do a cost benefit analysis, but they don't carry it all the way through. You're going to spend $2,500, $3,500 doing this program, and that's what sticks in your mind. But you're going to make back 2 to 4 times that amount in just commissions, not even counting funeral revenue.
Right.
I have a funeral director that I worked with for a long time, and early on, I asked her about doing a second seminar, and she said, well, I spent $4,500 on that seminar. And I said, yeah, but you made $11,000. And we had that conversation 3 different times because she just couldn't get past, she spent $4,500. And I'm like, I'll do that all day long. Spend $4,511.
Yeah,
not a problem.
I think that's a good point. I think also, you're creating new opportunities for the funeral home owner in terms of new relationships and strengthening existing relationships. But also, think about the opportunity cost if you did not have that event. In other words,
yes,
you missed an opportunity to meet that person, tell about your business, etc.
Or worse yet, the guy across the street does it. One of the things we try and do at Laker is bring you what I call the dang it ideas. And these are things, if you saw the guy going across the street and doing this, you'd say, dang it.
I like that.
And so we want the competitor to be saying dang it, not us.
Make them say dang it.
Yeah. So, and then I think, Paul, too, they don't know me. They might not know the person doing the presentation, and they're trusting that person to get up in front of the room and represent their funeral home. And that's a scary thing to do, and I understand that. And what I try and let the funeral home owner know is it's not about selling preneed. Yeah, that's what we want to do, but it's about your funeral home. And I don't want to do just one seminar. I want to do 18 seminars with you over the next 9 years. So I'm not going to screw that opportunity up to make you look very good. Yeah.
Yes, when you have that long-term focus, it really puts the onus on you to earn their trust and
Yes.
maintain their reputation. It's their name on the door, their name on the building.
I mean, I want them coming up to me after that first seminar and going, hey, when can we do another one?
Well, that's a good segue, I guess, when you think about, the surprises that they might have. I'm just thinking, if you have 60 people in your funeral home, it's possible that half of those people you maybe never met before, or never served in their family, and you're always pleasantly surprised to see those kinds of opportunities.
Well, Paul, I know how important that is. And on our pre-programmed survey that we have them fill out, one of the questions is this the first time in our building? And man, when I see a fifth to a quarter of those attendees who've never been in the building before, that makes me happy. That puts a smile on my face.
Yeah. I just think it's so good to speak to, I guess, the timing, because obviously no one wants to come into the funeral home, but the time to come in the funeral home is well before anyone has ever experienced any illness or, any conversations with a medical practitioner or what have you. The time to do it's when everyone's thinking clearly and feeling great.
Yes. I mean, it's entirely different. We've all sat down with that person who's been given a terminal diagnosis. That's a tough conversation. But if I can deal with a couple in their 60s who are looking forward to retirement, and yeah, that's an entirely different conversation now.
Yeah, it really is.
Versus also that couple in their 60s who told their kids for 20 years, oh, you don't need to do anything, and then they die and the kids come in. That's a hard time to try and convince them of the value of having a service.
Yeah, it's hard to overcome a lot of those, I guess, preconceived opinions and those things. So that's interesting, Pat. Let's shift gears a little bit. We'll talk about the types of seminars you guys bring to the table for funeral homes. So what kind of topics are you covering, and can you elaborate what you and your team are presenting to the audience there?
All right. Well, we've got about 30 different seminar formats that we can use, and they're not 30 entirely different formats. They share a lot of content, but some topics that are involved in all of them are, at some point, someone's going to ask, how much does a funeral cost?
Of course. Everybody wants to save money, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that in the first 5 minutes of the program. Let's give them 3 ballpark examples that they can fall into. Let's be really transparent and toss it out there. Now, I have a way to do that to protect the funeral home. So someone isn't walking in the door and saying, well, that guy said X amount of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is cremation. Let's talk about that, what you can do, what you can't do. We might discuss death away from home. We're going to throw a little Medicaid planning in there, the spend down situations, and the way to protect your money. And then we also like to use some of Dr. Wolfeld's material, and that's typically what we'll start with, is the value of having a gathering of some type. And I'm old enough and I got enough gray hair that I can tell people things in a very direct manner, and why that funeral service of some type, way, shape, or form is an important thing to do.
Yeah, why it matters. And this is a great opportunity to be able to share that and convey that, answer whatever questions they have. And I'm sure you've heard all kinds of questions, I'm sure, at your seminar. So any of them come to mind, like most surprising questions you got for some of your audience members?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's not questions, but it's statements, or if we have an attorney as one of the speakers, someone will say something to the effect of, well, in 1989, when my cousin died, but yeah, how much does it cost? Or they'll ask a question that we just went over 5 minutes ago, but they were taking notes or talking to the person they came with or whatever. But it just involves around little things, obvious things that are obvious to us.
Yeah, I would think portability might come up on occasion.
Always, and we stress that. That's one of the slides we have is, it's your money. It doesn't belong to the funeral home. To kind of sum it up when we go through it all, is we say something to the effect of, the funeral home has to keep all the promises they made to you, but you can change your mind. And that makes people comfortable.
Yeah, I love it. Good stuff there, Pat. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to create a successful seminar. I mean, so what do you think would be some key elements to make a seminar very successful?
Number one is the publicity. You've got to go through all the steps. We have a big checklist, everything we want to do. 2, I would say it's got to be a real presentation. Don't go up there and ad lib or off the cuff or whatever. You need to know what your first words out of your mouth are going to be. You need to know the order you're going to present this in. And then you need to know what's the last thing you're going to say and ask them to do at the end of the program. So it's got to be entertaining. Got to have a little fun with it. And I don't mean telling jokes. It's got to seem conversational. But 3 or 4 times you want to get a little chuckle or a laugh out of the people there.
Yeah, if you can laugh a little bit, then I think that helps break down some of the barriers.
Yes.
I think, would you agree that having food is a good idea at these seminars, some sort of a snack?
Well, the first thing, that the funeral home worries about is, they're just coming for the meal.
Yeah.
And that happens, Paul, but it's very, very rare. Most people aren't
serving prime rib or something. It's probably not.
No. Subway's
coffee and.
Yeah, well, we always have at least cookies and coffee or whatever. We have some funeral homes that do up a real nice spread, cheese trays and fresh fruit and all of those things. We have a program where we serve everybody pizza. So that it's not necessary, but it's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. I think it's just nice for giving them something to do and helping them relax and just good for fellowship, just in general. So that's why we just like to eat. I know I do.
Yeah. Well, and it gives you another chance to chat with someone about, take 2 cookies. I shouldn't. I mean, just stupid little stuff, but it builds a little relationship.
I love that. That's a good idea. And so let's talk about some of the presentation. So you mentioned having a professional approach, having an approach that what you're going to say, you start on time, you finish on time. Do you incorporate stories that that have encountered to you, or is that just up to the audience or the presenter?
We do use a couple of stories. We use them pretty sparingly, but what I've found with a story is it's got to illustrate a solution to a common problem to be effective. It's got to be kind of broad in its appeal, but specific in its application. And then you think about some of the best comics or speakers you've ever seen is they're telling a story, and it should never have an obvious ending. When you finish that story, you want the people in the audience to be going, I didn't see that coming. And now it's effective. Now it's powerful. So again, stories are important, but you got to put a little work into them. Good storytellers are hard to find.
Yes, they are. And again, if you could incorporate maybe a personal story, that could be beneficial, again, depending on the story.
Yep. One of the stories I tell is about my brother and my sister and I meeting at the funeral home the day after my mother died. And it doesn't go where you think it's going to go. It's very powerful. And I see every woman's head in the room nodding. And so that's a pretty powerful one that we use.
I love it. Well, that's a good piece of advice there. Let's talk about mistakes in seminars. I mean, things that you've learned or things that we would want to avoid as a common pitfall for somebody. So what could you share with the audience today?
Trust your slides and your preparation. Don't go into different order. Don't go off in different directions. Stay with what you had at 10 o'clock last night. Keep it. Don't deviate from it. A lot of the problems, Paul, come into play is when the preparation isn't done. We want to call every single person the day before the seminar to remind them about the program. That's just, we don't have a lot of rules at Laker, but that's one rule that we have. Everybody gets a phone call to remind them and encourage them to bring a friend. We don't go around and pay when we don't go around and pay personal visits to clergy, other centers of influence in town, and ask them to come. I can't tell you how many funeral homes don't put the seminar on their webpage. Okay, that leaves me at a loss.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. Or they skip steps in the preparation. And I see this more with funeral homes and agents that we've worked together with for a long time, and they'll think, well, I don't need to do that this time. And then we don't get the turnout that we'd like to have. You don't win a football game in practice. You win a football game in practice. It's what you do going into the game that helps you to win it. And then a couple other mistakes is we don't take any questions during the presentation. So we ask everyone, we're going to do a question and answer at the end. And someone will ask a very specific question, and then someone goes into a very specific answer. And again, you can just see the other people in the room squirming. They've been sitting there for an hour and 5 minutes. They're ready to go. So you want to say something like, yes, Paul, the short answer is yes, and I can talk to you a little bit more about that afterwards. Or someone, this happens a lot, and someone will say, do I have to pick an urn to prearrange, or do I have to pick out my casket ahead of time? And then before I can answer it, the agent or the funeral director will say, yes, no, sir, if you don't want to, you don't have to do that. So anyway, those are just some of my...
That's good advice there, though, because, you could go in a direction that you're not prepared for it to go, and then you got a whole group mentality happening, and next thing you know, your seminar just got derailed through no fault of your own. So
yeah, they were feeling great. They laughed at the last joke, and now you can just feel the vibe starting to die. And so what I like to remind all our people who are in the question and answer session is, if someone asks you what time it is, you do not tell them how to build a watch.
Another story. Okay, let's talk a little bit. I know you mentioned economics earlier, some of the numbers, you're a numbers person. Let's hit on some of the metrics that matter here. And you touched on some of the kind of the average cost, and maybe it'd be good maybe just to share what those look like, and how do you know if it's a successful event or not?
Yep. Well, we want to get a return rate. And when I say return rate, I mean actual seats in the chair of over 1.5%. Right now we're averaging in about 1.75%. Now it could be way higher, it could be way lower, depending on the demographics of the market. We may only have to send out 2,500 invites, or we may have to send out 5,000 invites. So that, again, all discussions I have with the funeral director ahead of time on that. We're not at the point yet where we cannot mail out anything and just do it on social media. That works for a small group that the agent maybe is doing by themselves, but this is a bigger event. We still need to put a piece of paper in folks' hands.
Yeah, it's like getting the word out is always important, and there's ways you can do it, old school legacy kind of ways, or you can still do it in the digital way. And the main thing
both is best.
They have to know.
Both is best. I'm just looking at some other numbers that I got here. The average cost per seminar is about $2,100. That doesn't include food or printing or door prizes or things like that. That's just the publicity on the front end. And then when we factor in the leads for the people that couldn't come to the seminar but still have interest in it, then that 1.75, that'll go up, that'll increase.
That's pretty reasonable when you think about just getting that number of people in your building when there's no funeral.
Right. And again, it depends on the type of program. If we're doing one in a church, our cost per attendee goes way down. Our average funding off a church program is almost $1,000 a policy higher, and our average age is about 6 years younger. So those are great places to do programs.
I wonder what's driving that. That's curious. You got any thoughts on that?
Yep. They're in a familiar environment. They're comfortable. If you go to church every Sunday, you're more likely to have a funeral service at your church. So yeah, those are really, really good. But as I said earlier on, Paul, this should be at the very least a revenue neutral undertaking. It should always pay for itself. If it's not paying for itself, there's a couple rocks I can pick up and look under, and I can tell the funeral homeowner why it didn't.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, the benefits have to outweigh the cost of everything we do. And I think the key there is just understanding what the true benefits are and what the true costs are. And sometimes we need to help people walk through that exercise.
Yep. And here's a problem with the seminar, Paul, is these are the easiest fundings you're ever going to write in your life. And so sometimes we get hooked on them. And we forget to do the other types of lead generation that we're also doing. And so that's a big caution flag we like to wave. Is it's 80, and I'm not exaggerating, but 85 to 90% of the people who come to a seminar are signing up for an appointment before they walk out the door.
I believe it. I believe it. Because
That's just,
they've done the hardest part, which is just confronting the issue.
yep, yep. And we have a very strong close. We have a very strong call to action. And
Well, and
again,
you're
no,
helping. I mean, you're adding clarity, or I guess you're unconfusing people. If we
yep.
can say that we unconfused them.
Well, and people will do what you ask them to do. If you just kind of hem and haw around it and, well, call me if you're interested, you're not going to help as many people take care of this part of their estate plan. And again, it's not pushy, it's just direct.
And I think people appreciate directness, generally speaking.
Yep. At the very beginning of our presentation, we ask everyone who's attended to look at this as a starting point today and to make a promise to themselves to do something about this. So then at the very end, I pull up the same exact slide that I had at the start and I say, okay, where do you start? It's right here. And then we lay it out for them.
Man, what an aggressive close, Pat.
I know.
Where do we start? Where would you like to begin? That sounds very aggressive.
Yep. Just you start right here.
No, I'm kidding. I love the way you do it. It's just a natural conclusion of a well thought through process.
Well, and people like that when you start with something, tell them what you're going to do, and then you finish up with that same thing.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to that professional presentation that I was talking to you about.
Love it. Hey, well, let's wrap up here a little bit.
Sure.
I think I'd love to see if you could share some advice. What's one thing you hope funeral directors would hope to take away from this conversation?
The public wants this. They want to come in and ask you questions, and they want to deal with a competent, caring professional. There's obviously a demand for it. So that would be the first thing, because otherwise, if you're not doing this, you're letting the internet educate your families, and that's not always a good thing. So that would be kind of one thing I would leave behind. The other thing is it's fun. We're going to have a good time. We're going to have an enjoyable time. You're going to feel good about what you did. People are going to be coming up to the funeral home owner after the program and shaking their hand and thanking them for doing this. So it's a real positive. And then anyone who has fears of doing this would be like me working a funeral with your firm. I would just do what you told me to do. And I would trust you to make sure the funeral overall goes well. And so what we tell the funeral home is nothing's going to happen that we haven't seen before. It's all going to be good. It's all going to be positive. And I promise you, you'll be happy that you did this.
Love that vision, Pat. Thanks for those insights. That's really, really good. Listen, big thanks to Pat Zalusky for joining us today and for showing us how seminars can transform your funeral home's outreach. To every director listening, seminars aren't just events. They're how you build trust before families actually need you. Love this episode? Subscribe and check out our other episodes for more strategies and growth tips. Plus, share your seminar stories with us at the Director's Playbook at funeraldirectorslife.com. And that way we can share some of those stories. Thank you for being here. See you next time, everybody, on the Director's Playbook.